Hello, this is Demetria Rougeau Shabazz, and this is another installment of the Western Mass Media Justice Network series. And today, I have the pleasure of having a guest, Jessica Innis. And Jessica is the founder and CEO of Red Flowers, an online platform that promotes, empowers, and engages Black women and Black identities through cultural activism. This March, Jessica launched an online magazine entitled Bloom, dedicated to the wellness and care of Black women. Hello, Jessica.
Hi.
Hi, so good to have you here.
So good to be here.
I'm so excited about your magazine, but I wanted to talk with you a bit before we really open up about the magazine Bloom. In June, you're hosting a workshop at the National Conference on Race and Ethnicity, known as NCORE, and your workshop's entitled Designing Spaces for Inclusion. Now, of course, I know why this is all pertinent to how you get to your magazine, but if you could kind of unpack that, what is design thinking and what is the importance of considering diversity in design?
Okay, so design thinking is basically this process. And in regards to this process, it's kind of looking at your user and doing human-centered design where you create something with that person in mind.
And this is for everything, spaces, actual spaces, literal spaces?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Yeah. So, and I kind of tailored my workshop in regards to design thinking because, like I said, design thinking is necessarily a process, but it can be applicable to many fields. So in regards to how I wanted to look at it is that while I was attending my undergrad, I kind of saw a split in how different spaces kind of invited different people. And I was also house president at the time. So one of the key things that we're supposed to do
And this was at Smith?
Yes. This is while I was at Smith. One of the key things that we're supposed to do is focus on creating a belonging atmosphere for all the people who live within the house. And not everybody's going to agree on every single thing. And people are going to come from different places, but how can you create an inviting space? And then with my background in design thinking, I was like, okay, so how can we use this process and apply it to physical spaces, but also like the mindsets within those spaces? And that's kind of how I came to put together that workshop.
And when you talk about diversity and inclusion, you're talking about racial diversity, ethnic diversity. What type of diversities? Because there's, of course, many.
Yeah.
What are we talking
about?
So
I see it more so like however people identify. So like one of the big issues, let me use an example, is like, let's think about how we look at Black spaces. So like who is missing within the conversations? Like we know that there are sometimes conversations that occur in regards to whether Black queers fit into Black spaces, or whether or not people who come from different ethnicities, specifically like Latinos, whether they fit in within that space. And then there's also sometimes differences when you think about like how much the church is a part of the Black community. Now, what about people with different religions and how they are in Black spaces, and whether or not those people fit into what is considered that space. So that's when I think of it, when I look at it as diversity and inclusion, is like, what are the people who, what are their identities and how they're coming into that space, and trying to design a space specifically that everybody can feel like they belong or at least are welcomed.
That's great, and we need that, of course. It's something that is, even though it's like a simple thing to think about, who's missing and how we can make this a welcoming space. Corporations, schools, dorms may not always think about that. And it's great that you are incorporating what you learned, of course, actually into what you're doing now. You're working as an operations and student engagement specialist at the Bethune Center for Entrepreneurship at UMass. What do you do exactly, and what does this have to do with design thinking?
So what do I do exactly? I'm basically in charge of like logistics, operations, and student engagement. So I usually work with like student entrepreneurs on campus, handling the space. Today, what I did was like I subbed in for a part of my professor's class for his design thinking class. And I talked to other students about design thinking, entrepreneurship, and innovation. For the most part, that's what I do, and like handling some of our logistics in regards to events and working with student clubs, just kind of helping students along the way kind of learn about these processes while they go through their college years.
Something that they can take from UMass as an undergrad, like you did from Smith,
Yeah.
and incorporate into their professions or graduate school or what have you, or their life, right?
Yeah, like there's a lot of student ventures on campus right now that are working on using entrepreneurship, innovation, design thinking, and looking at it as a long run for something that they want to do in long term.
Really, is there any example you'd care to offer?
So some of the bigger examples, there's ad outreach, which is mainly like they utilize YouTube video ads, and they're actually generating revenue like throughout the year, and they actually hire people while being on UMass campus. There's also a Clarity, which is another startup where they have partnered with a giant water company, and they make water purification devices. So like these are students who made deals with like other companies.
So these are student entrepreneurs through the Eisenberg School, or
they can be from any department.
Really?
So like the Clarity team, one of them is environmental engineering, and for ad outreach, those are Eisenberg students, but we've also had other students from the computer science department, other parts of engineering, like a lot of the sciences. We actually have more students from sciences than Eisenberg that actually are part of our center.
That's fascinating. And you're helping them think through not only their kind of business plans, but how to be inclusive within those business plans and how to think of spaces, right?
Yeah.
And who's going to be in those spaces.
Yeah, so a lot of the times I help people go through the process. Like, I like to tell people to think of it more from a design thinking approach than an entrepreneurial approach. Because to me, an entrepreneurial approach means that you start from like, oh, let's create something and then ask people, instead of like asking people what they would like to see, kind of doing the empathy portion of design thinking, and then build for your user so that you can better see like what the scope is. So those are some of the bigger student entrepreneurs, but I also work with individual students. I personally like working with people of color students because I feel like they tend to have the least amount of access to resources usually. So I help them go through the process as well.
Wow. So the next generation we can expect, perhaps with your help and other folks who are thinking about these issues that are real problems in the business workspace, right? But also a lot of these spaces in terms of research where people are having to work together.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's hopeful. You were a chemistry and economics major at Smith. How did your undergraduate years prepare you for launching your own business platform, Red Flowers, and your magazine, Bloom?
Yeah, so originally when I started Red Flowers, I never saw it as an online platform. I originally wanted to create it was called Hair Care for Black Women with Little Time and Dry Hair. And it was
I can relate, yes.
Yeah, so I was looking at it as more so as a wash and go system. And the
Okay.
person I had in mind is my mother, because my mother works terribly long hours. She's always busy. So I was like, chemistry. So I did a lot of hair chemistry, material science while I was in my undergrad time. And I was very much involved with entrepreneurship, innovation, design thinking, worked with the Conway Center for Entrepreneurship, which are run by two wonderful people.
Is that at Smith?
Yes, at
Yes,
Smith. And that's kind of how like I first thought of Red Flowers. And then I took a step back. I was like, who are the people that I really want to help? What is it that I really want to do? Like, why do some of these problems exist? So I looked more into like why I was even doing this in the first place, and how I saw it was like I really wanted to help my mother. I really wanted to help, like, what are the perceptions? I was like, this is just, it's bigger than me, it's bigger than my mother, it's more people. So I started to talk to more people, have conversations. I was like, tell me about your experience, kind of doing that empathy portion of design thinking. And that's kind of how I led into doing the Red Flowers platform. And getting into the second part of like how the zine was created.
Right.
So the zine was created when I was actually, so I coded the website that exists.
There goes that chemistry and econ background. Okay.
Well, no. So, well, that's more so computer science. But like, I was working on websites when I was in like middle school. This is how I made Side Cash. Okay. So I had used other sites at the other time, but I was like, okay, whatever. I'm gonna finally build it. And when I was building it, I really thought about it, and I was like, I created the care portion because I wanted to focus on self-actualization and self-care for Black women and Black identities. And I was like, oh, wouldn't it be great if there was a resource on here, like a guide that explains on how you could look at guide and look at care. And I started by going to Barnes and Nobles, and I went through Barnes and Nobles and I looked at all the magazines and everything. There was nothing. I was like,
Nothing with women of color necessarily on
like
it.
there wasn't anything with women. There wasn't anything that looked at health and wellness and care from a very intersectional perspective. And I was like, so my motto is, if it doesn't exist, create it yourself.
Great motto.
So
Yeah.
it's kind of like how it works. So I was like, all right. So now I was like, let's start working on this project. And I reached out, I put out I started with a Facebook blast. I was like, hey, I'm looking to do this. I'm looking to do this with it. Is anybody who has interested in article writing, poetry, art, any of these things looking to contribute to this zine?
Right.
And I got a lot of replies back, and I contacted everyone immediately after they responded. And then I also reached out to people personally. Because I was like, okay, who do I know who does great stuff? I was like, maybe if I just reach out to them, they'd be interested in doing. And that was actually more effective than the Facebook post. Because I was like, okay, I've seen you done this. Like the cover, for instance. The cover.
Yeah, it's a beautiful cover.
The cover I had seen on my, like this girl who I am friends with, but I saw it on her Instagram page because I know that she paints. And I was like, whoa.
So that's original artwork.
Yeah, it's original. Yeah. Everything in the zine is original artwork. Even the little sketch drawings.
Right.
I drew all those out. That was so time consuming.
Well, I think it's adorable, but overall the magazine is beautifully done.
Thank
right?
you.
I mean, your use of space, I guess the design thinking as well in that. Yeah. But the original artwork, the articles, I mean, they really speak to me. And of course, I'm no longer a young woman. Yeah. But I think, it's a magazine that I looked at and I immediately wanted to send to some of my students, my nieces, let them see what you're doing and hopefully contribute. There's poetry. There's, like you say, there's kind of self-help in terms of well-being, both mental and physical. Really lovely.
There's a lot of stuff in there.
Yeah, but it's well done.
Thank you. And that was actually something that you brought up, like in terms of audience. I was trying to incorporate more people from different backgrounds. So like most of the people in there, yes, are a younger crowd because they're a lot easier for me to access because same age range. But like there were some people like the person the interview with Shaquan Reed, who was in there, who was actually a therapist. She was more so on the older end. One of the other poetries that were contributed as well was also someone who's like a mom who takes care of her kid. So I was really trying to figure out how could I, and as I look more forward into doing this in the future, I really wanted to make sure that I'm really getting a broad range of where the material is coming from. And I was also very intentional with the identities of the people who also contributed, because I wanted it to feel like everyone who read it could kind of see themselves in the zine. Right. Because representation in all matters, not just race, but like other parts of my identity is also important.
I think you see that in it, though.
Yeah.
You can see a diversity of Black women reflected in that magazine. And so I appreciated that. I mean, they're beautiful images, but they're very real and authentic. None of the airbrushing that you get, but they're beautiful, and so I really, really appreciate it. I think it's fresh. I'm looking for more. Like I said, I immediately, I think when you sent it to me, I emailed you right back and I said, oh, am I able to send this out and share, you know? And of course you said yes. So I really appreciate
of course.
that. Yeah. So what, is there anything in your life that inspired Bloom? I mean, you talk about how it's about these different identities of being a Black woman, but personally, are there things in terms of creating Bloom that inspired you? Your background, family, is something that inspired you to create Bloom?
Yeah. So actually, Bloom kind of bloomed at a very sad time in my life. I was kind of going through a lot of depressive notions at the time that I was looking into forming it. So to me, that's why it kind of came as a project that was like, I should do this now, because I really wanted to, I was looking kind of more so at my own mental health situation. And I thought it would be really nice to put it together. And then looking, after having conversations, because I had just recently had a conversation with one of my friends as well, who was also going through a lot of depressive notions, I was like, wouldn't it be nice if this existed?
Sure.
And I think that's what it was definitely not a project I was looking to start at that exact moment. It was kind of more like something that happened along with like just a lot of things going on in life. I was like, hey, this is the time to do it.
Wow.
And usually, sadly, the way that I usually move through my notions of stuff is by being very productive. So I'm like, let's work and get something done. And to me, it was a hectic project. It was definitely not in any way easy, but it very much worthwhile.
Great. Well, most good things are worth the hard work. But what's nice about it is that you open it up, and it's like meeting a friend, another Black woman, you know, and reflecting back at you in the poetry and in the articles. And speaking of mental health sometime, I mean, it's something that we don't talk about a lot. Not enough in the Black community.
And that's exactly why.
Exactly, but it's a very real issue. And what I love about it, without being preachy or saying, you know, hey, we need to talk about these things. Of course we do, we should. But it's kind of like a friend, you know, being there for you. And I just wish you success with this beautiful magazine and this beautiful endeavor. Contributors, you talked about a little bit about them. Some of your contributors, how are they able to, now that you've launched this first edition, if people wanted to get involved in the magazine, what should they do? Should they go to your Facebook page, or what do they need to do to get in contact with you to contribute?
So what they have to do is email me, which I put on the actual, I think I might have put it on the zine page, or I might have put it just on the collab page of the website. But I talked so it was actually really interesting. After I had finally finished it, more people were like, can I be a part of the next one? And I was like, what?
Oh, great. I mean, that's a good thing.
It was great. But
They're excited about it.
I was like, I hadn't even thought that far ahead. I was just like glad that I was like, I've come to the completion point.
Right.
And they were like, I'm sorry I couldn't be a part of the past, the one that just came out, but can I be a part of the next one? Or like this one girl who was one of the contributors was like, I have another article idea. I was like, great. At the same time, I was like, I'm a little bit tired. Can we talk about this in a week?
Right.
So it was kind of in that sense. So I feel like if more people want to get interested, make an email me.
Okay.
Which is, it's me, but it's the site's email.
Right.
And you can get involved just saying that you're interested and want to be a part of it.
They can contribute artwork.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Anything that they so please, or like if they want to do an article, that's to me more of a discussion, because I want to make sure that it fits with the mission of what the zine is supposed to do. So if it's a little bit like out there, I'm gonna be like, we need to pull it back in.
Make sure it fits with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
So, but everything else is kind of like pick and choose. I was like,
awesome.
okay.
So we'll have that available, and hopefully folks will get in touch with you. what's next for Red Flowers and for Jessica?
So in terms of Red Flowers, I'll start with that one because that's a lot easier question for me. I'm going to continue with the zine, and I'm going to do it in a quarterly fashion. So it would be released every 3 months. I need to still talk to the previous contributors who are not interested. But I wanted to also work on editing all the video clips that I have to put into Red Flowers Media, because I think I've spent a lot of time focusing on, I like to call them 2 separate branches underneath Red Flowers. So there's Red Flowers Care, which is what the zine is underneath, and Red Flowers Media, which focuses on positive representation and controversial thought.
And when you go into the website, you can see many of these videos, which are also nicely done.
Yeah. So I want to focus on editing and putting together the conversation series and segments that I have there, and then work on the guided care coach that nobody knows about, and I'm not going to explain right now.
Okay, that's going to be a surprise.
Yes.
All right, okay, we'll wait for that.
But there's like a picture and a link that clicks to nowhere because I just want people to see it.
We'll be waiting.
Yes.
All right.
And then for me, I'm supposed to go back to New Jersey.
Which is your home.
Yeah, which is my home pretty soon. And I don't know, I'm still trying to figure out that part in terms of what's next for me. Like, I know I have the conference and everything. I have to deal with some things regarding my family. We're also moving. So
it's a lot.
Yeah, so there's a lot going on. I can't really give you a clear path. It's kind of like a zigzag motion.
But you're going to continue the magazine and Red Flowers.
Yes, obviously, no matter where I go.
Well, we're going to look for more great things from you. And I feel, so uplifted to know you and to realize that the future with young women like yourself out there and doing things, if it's not there, as you say, you need to make it. So we so appreciate you being with us today, Jessica.
Thank you for having me once again.
Thank you. Thank you all for joining us.